this conversation and make sure that we are not usurped for any other purpose or reason other than what originally brought us here, which is to make an impactful change for our communities and make sure that we do not go back to whatever that was, business as usual. And so I think that's important. Obviously, I think there is a lot of value in having this very frank discussion, as uncomfortable as it might be. I think it's important. It's important for me, for sure. Thank you.
This is Darcel. Julina, thank you for saying that. That is exactly what I'm feeling. This is not new. This is not a surprise. It's being highlighted, but this has been the institutional racism, the structural racism, the embedded racism has been a part of our history, and it continues to be there. We want to make sure that we don't turn this into a moment and forget about the history that goes into it and the future yet to come. We have work to do, and we're hurting.
Yeah, this is Trevor speaking from Oakstop, and I agree with the sentiments of others, especially this most recent sentiment. We're very much focused this week on George Floyd, but there was plenty of other killings in just the last couple of weeks that many of us had to watch in video, and it's all part of the same sort of historical legacy of this country. And with regards to today, I personally feel that if we've now made time for this call, that we should continue more or less with this call. But let's, as we continue this entire process over the next couple of months, let's use racial injustice as a backdrop for how we address the changes that we're putting forth, because that's something that has, as was just said, has been swept under the rug time and time again. For whatever reasons. And I think now we're in a position where we can actually let this be more of a driving factor in our decision making as we think about how to repair this city.
Liz, your hand was up, so I'll unmute you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling the same way as everyone else. Today was rough. This weekend was rough. In fact, I was scheduled to present, and I had to rethink about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. But then I thought about it, and like everyone said, this is, the strength in being in the labor movement and being a union leader is the fact that we've always been committed to social justice. And that includes economic recovery. Because I represent, the African-American letter carrier who's currently worried about losing their job because of privatization, or the Black nurse who worries about losing her job because she works at a community health clinic and we don't have any money. So with that, I think it's important for us to talk about what's happening, because unfortunately it's not going to be the last. And just because we have a pandemic and we have COVID doesn't mean that structural racism is going away. In fact, we've seen it with COVID impacting the African American and Latino communities even more than others. So I'm glad that we're making the space today, and I'm glad that we're going to continue to do the work. But that includes making sure we address the structural racism and how we use what's happening now to influence our recommendations as part of this group.
Okay, Jose, you want to? I was just say, it sounds from the group that there's a feeling that we should move forward with the agenda. So thank you all for your comments. Oh, Jessica Chen, here, let me unmute you, Jessica. You have your hand up. There you go.
Hi, everybody. Jessica Chen, Chinatown Chamber of Commerce. And usually I do the weekly check-in with our merchants, but today when I drove by and I just couldn't say anything because, as you know, actually we have like a probably like a 2/3 of the restaurants and then grocery store remain open during the COVID-19 sheltering in place. But this morning when I drove by, and most of them closed. Only a few grocery stores open for residents who need groceries, fresh produce. And then when I leave, you know, right after 2 o'clock, and every store shut down and all boarded out. This is worse than sheltering in place, COVID-19 pandemic, and I really. And if you notice that actually Chinatown merchants got really bad damage and vandalized Friday night. And you know, it's really hard at this moment to say anything positive. And but I hope you can understand that we really try to support human rights, and but also, you know, our small business owner, pub and mom shops, we all damaged seriously just over the weekend. And we're still trying to work together, but at this moment, I just want to let you know Chinatown is really in bad shape, very much. And yeah, I hope, you know, we can really work together. And then, you know, I will try my best to help our business, but they are all hurting. They don't understand what's going on, why they need to suffer one by one. But you know, we support, you know, city effort, and we support everybody. But just, you know, at this moment, I really just feel really happy, and I just want to share with you, and hopefully we can come up with some better plan to help those, you know, language barrier, local business, and small pop and mom shops, and to survive after all this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. I see Lynn Vera has her hand raised. We'll take one more comment maybe, and then we'll, it sounds like the consensus is to move forward. So we'll hear from Lynn, and then we'll move forward with the agenda, and we'll hand it off to Micah and Marissa to take it from there. So Lynn, I think you are unmuted now.
Thank you. Without repeating what others have said and that I agree with, I wanted to also add that you know, not only has COVID hit communities of color harder, not only is there this inherent bias and racism in so many institutions, now even the protests and the damage that is being done has hit minority communities, not just in Oakland, but around the country, harder. And so it's just it's another level that is so frustrating. I feel that it makes our work, which was to bring back, to create equity, even more important. And one concern that I have that has not been brought up yet is the people, where I work, it's a 24/7 business. I'm worried about our employees coming to and going from work, or who are still at work. I'm worried about other businesses who may have hours where there are employees there that could get caught up and harmed if a building is on fire or being looted. And so I'm very concerned about all of those people, and I don't quite know what to do about it.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay. I think, Jose, it sounds like we want to move forward. I shared information about the press conference in the chat so everyone can see where it's happening. And I think, as I mentioned before, the county announcement is that it will start at 8 p.m. for the curfew time. So that's a countywide curfew starting at 8 p.m. And, you know, Oakland will likely be following suit at the Oakland level and discussing that in the press conference. So that information is available, but it sounds like we're gonna move forward in a spirit of sort of solidarity and recognition of the importance and the value of this work. So I appreciate all of your words so much, and thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Micah Weinberg, one of our co-facilitators, and I'll start sharing the screen so he can walk us through our agenda.
Great, thank you so much. I'll go through the agenda quickly. Then I'm going to review some of the results of what we heard back from you on our initial survey. Then I'm going to turn it over to Saru and Liz to do a presentation centering workers in all of this. And then we will get report outs from the working groups. My working group discussion was led by Julina and very inspiring, and it's obviously a very difficult time, but ground ourselves in the work. If we can move on quickly to the survey feedback. All right. So what we heard from you is that the data and information that we need to consider reopening, including how we identify the businesses that have been impacted, now unfortunately also in some cases impacted by damage to their facilities, need to understand how these impacts are different from the perspective of race and ethnicity, how the vulnerable employees have been impacted, and then also the overlap between health and the economy, and how that's going to affect not only our medical facilities, but also our businesses. Next slide. So when we asked you what the opportunities and challenges are, obviously the kind of key opportunities including addressing these disparities that were not created in the last couple of months, that were there screaming out for our attention. And I know everybody here on this call has been focused on this for a long period of time, but we don't want an economic recovery. We need an economic renewal. We don't want to recover the deeply inequitable society that we had. We have an opportunity, I think, to use this moment to really examine whether our permitting process is consistent with the needs of our community and our businesses, especially to make sure that we're empowering minority small businesses, women-owned businesses, and then also to build collaboration between the state, regional, county, and city levels on all these different issues. The challenges are legion. Some that really came up again and again from our survey of you folks was the distribution of resources and whether they're actually going to the vulnerable groups and to the businesses. I know that many of you, myself included, a little frustrated when we look at the federal level and see where the, primarily the resources are going. Challenges helping small businesses and other businesses adapt their business models, both during and coming out of shelter in place, as this will, there is no business as usual to return to on a number of different factors. And so making sure they have the technical assistance in order to be able to adapt. And then just dealing with the issue of rent and mortgage, which again, a huge issue a couple of months ago, but still, exacerbated by the situation. Next slide. And there was a comment that someone said they wanted to comment on in the chat from Linda G. Sorry, I'm making this more complicated, but like these things to be more interactive, and I was just trying to go through this pretty quickly.
I have a question.
All right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Linda Grant from East Oakland, owner of East Oakland Fried Chicken. And, I'm also a part of the Oakland Cannabis Equity Program that Desley Brooks and Ms. Flynn and them started back in 2016. And the Cannabis Equity Program is really working for people of color. Some, not all, but the majority of people who are getting into the equity program has helped. What I think the city should do, if you really want to help minority businesses, we need to create an equity business permitting program just like they did for the cannabis equity program. It made permits cheaper, but we didn't even have to pay for the permits and stuff like that. So I feel like a business equity program could really help with the permits and stuff like that. Like that could just ease out the permits and stuff like that. If you look at the cannabis equity model, it was the same thing. We could do the same thing with small businesses.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, permitting right at the top, and I appreciate that additional detail.
Yeah.
So just quickly, what will be the most impactful short-term supports? Shopping local, mediating rent disputes, commercial rent as well, obviously, really ramping up our job placement services and helping people with their PPE and shelter-in-place requirements. And then, this is not just what can the city do, that's what can private philanthropic and community organizations provide. Obviously PPE and disinfectant, also supportive funding and grants and technical assistance for small businesses. I know many of you have donated to or were actually literally out in the streets today, at your businesses or helping rebuild and clean other businesses. And I just really thank and appreciate all the work that everybody has done there. Next slide. And then how should we define a resilient and equitable economy? It's support for small businesses, making sure that folks can retrain, ensuring that there's a diverse selection of jobs and businesses in Oakland, and we don't become a monoculture or solely that we maintain a really vibrant and diverse local business community, and that we have we also keep in mind climate imperatives and environmental justice imperatives in business operations and consumer behaviors. Great. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Saru at One Fair Wage and Liz. One of the things that I wanted to make really clear is, at least as the facilitators thought about this, when we're breaking this up into the different phases of business, this is not to say we only care about the business issues associated with phase 2, 3, 4, or the cross-cutting business issues. In all of these types of businesses, we want to center the workers, center the employees, and make sure that none of this is going to work, obviously, without the employees. And so keeping them top of mind as we think about all these different things and not think about them as businesses as disconnected from the concerns of the people who work there. So to that end, turn it over to Saru, and I'm really excited about your presentation about centering workers in all of this. Saru.
And Saru, do you have slides to share? Do you want me to make you a host so you can share?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, I'd like you to please share my slides. Please let me share my slides.
Okay, one moment.
We're all getting a little bit better at this, but
I know it's a process.
I know that moment of panic of, is my Zoom going to do what it is that I need it to do?
So maybe while you're doing that,
go ahead and start while I find you. Sorry about that.
That's
okay. Are you in as Saru, or are you in as something else?
Right now it's showing up as MacBook Air 13 and it's not letting me rename it. I don't know why.
That is why I can't find you. Thank you. Just give me a moment.
So maybe while she's doing that, I share that this past few days, I work closly with Reverend William Barber. Some of you may know who he is. He's the leader of the campaign and led Moral Mondays movement in North Carolina and has become a voice around racial equity and gender equity. And he and I authored an op-ed together that should be coming out in the next couple of days, naming that George Floyd was actually a restaurant worker. He worked in a restaurant in Minneapolis, and he was, and his situation was, we talked to the family, or talked to his family. It was very similar to what we are hearing from restaurant workers all over the country, which is that communities of color, yes, are facing both more severe health disparities and definitely police brutality, but they have also faced for a very long time, frankly, since the founding of this country, very severe and deep income and wealth disparities as well. Structural racism is very connected to structural income and wealth inequality. And so I really do appreciate the time to talk about workers' issues, and just wish that and Liz were not some of the very few voices in this group to represent workers, because I think as we move forward as Oakland and think about really addressing structural inequity, we have to not only think about people of different races coming together and creating racial equity, we also have to think about class and the fact that when we come together to really resolve issues, it should be workers and employers working together. It shouldn't be a predominance of business owners and very few worker voices. And so that, it does make it a little bit hard. And I do want to say that my presentation today and the solutions that I'm raising are very much about things that I think that can benefit both workers and businesses. But I do want to share that there are some very unique challenges that workers are facing that I wish there were more people in this group to really raise, more than just myself and Liz. And just 1 second on that national picture, you know, I represent 13.5 million restaurant workers across America. 10 million of them have lost their jobs. And prior to the pandemic, the federal minimum wage for tipped restaurant workers in the United States has been $2.13 an hour. And that is a literal legacy of slavery. The first tipped workers in the United States were former slaves who were given a $0 wage and told to live off of tips. It's gone all the way from zero at emancipation to $2.13 an hour. And so you're talking about millions and millions of people in America right now, about 60% of whom are telling us they are ineligible for unemployment insurance, not just because of immigration issues, but because so many of them are being told that my sub-minimum wage of $2 or $3, as it is in 43 states in the United States plus tips, is too little to meet the minimum threshold to qualify for benefits for unemployment insurance. In other words, states are telling millions of workers across America right now that they are too poor to qualify for benefits that they have paid taxes to access. And so when we think about the level of anger right now, when we think about the level of anger across this country that low-wage workers and people of color are feeling and facing, yes, it is about police brutality. Yes, it is about repeated killings, but it is also much deeper and broader than that. It is about structural inequities that have a lot to do, by the way, with income inequality and the fact that people of color have been relegated to lower paying positions, lower paying jobs for a very long time, and the majority of them are not business owners. And as much as I do extend my great sympathy and love and solidarity to all the business owners on this call who are affected, I would ask in that same vein that we understand what low-wage workers in Oakland and across America are facing, because it is severe and it is truly, we are at Great Depression era levels of poverty and starvation in our industry. So just a little bit of background. I said there are 10 million workers across America who have lost their jobs. About 1.1 million workers in California in the restaurant industry have lost their jobs, and about 100,000 of that is from Oakland. 100,000 people have lost their jobs in the restaurant industry. We estimate another 11,000 other tipped and service workers. And what's so important to note, as Micah stated, is that there were real severe equity issues and mobility issues particularly for workers of color, but for low-wage workers in general in our industry prior to the pandemic, things that we needed to address collectively as workers and employers in our industry. And I am focusing on the restaurant and service sector. I know Liz will talk about other industries, but I will say it's important to note that the restaurant industry is both one of the largest and lowest paid sectors in Oakland, in California, and in the United States. And so it really does represent what millions and millions of people across the country are facing right now. The equity in our industry prior to the pandemic was such that, unfortunately, the Bay Area had the largest race wage gap, the largest gap between white workers and workers of color in the restaurant industry of any region in the United States. I'm going to say that again. The Bay Area, prior to the pandemic, had the largest wage gap between white workers and workers of color in the restaurant industry of any region in the United States of America. And that is because as wages have gone up, we have not paid enough attention to the fact that workers of color have been segregated into lower paying segments of the industry, casual and fast food as opposed to fine dining. And even if they are in fine dining, they are in what we call the back of the house. They're generally not in the front of the house where higher wages are to be found. So we had pretty severe equity and mobility issues prior to the pandemic. Now we're facing about a 15.7 unemployment rate in Oakland. It might be higher at this point. These numbers are a tiny little bit outdated. And that is about 32,000 restaurant jobs, which is about 75% of the loss, total loss, job loss in leisure and hospitality. So huge numbers. And again, while employers are really struggling in the restaurant industry, I just want to point out what this means for low-wage workers. So we started an emergency fund for low-wage workers, for service workers, for restaurant workers in particular. We raised about $23 million to hand out cash payments of dollars per worker. We had 175,000 workers apply to us from relief. Almost 1,200 of that 175,000 are from Oakland alone. That is about half of the number of applicants from the state of Pennsylvania, and about half the applicants from the state of New Jersey. I mean, we've had a very, very high number of people applying for relief from Oakland, perhaps because we have a larger number of workers in Oakland who don't have access to other benefits, who aren't able to apply for anything else. 61% of our applicants are telling us they don't have enough food to eat. 82% say they have 2 weeks or less of money to pay for groceries. 70% are saying they're not able to access unemployment insurance. That's higher than the national average of our fund applicants, which was 60%. 84% are saying that they're currently unable to pay for their rent or their mortgage. More than half are women, and about 3/4 have children. So when we say that this industry is in crisis, yes, small businesses are most definitely in crisis, but I would just like to uplift the fact that workers are in such severe crisis that they can't afford to eat. They can't afford to get groceries. They are having to find ways to feed their children that are not healthy, and it's a pretty severe situation. So we have been thinking about what are the collaborative efforts that we can think about that really do three things: address workers' needs, address employers' needs, and also address the longstanding inequities that existed prior to the pandemic at the same time. Can we think about relief that could address all three things at the same time? And there are some really good examples that I'd like to share with you very briefly, because I was only given 5 minutes. One is that we work together with an association of about 800 restaurant companies around the country that have been really committed to higher wages, increased racial equity, increased mobility. One of them is a man named Adam Orman from Locadoro in Austin, Texas, where the wage, again, is $2.13 an hour, but he pays all of his employees a livable wage. He doesn't pay that $2. He got together with about 30 businesses in Austin who are also committed to livable wages and increased equity. They call themselves Good Works Austin, and they created a collaborative document program to ensure safety for workers coming back to work, which includes a commitment by the employers to increased wages and higher equity when workers come back. And so that program certified all of the businesses that are part of it as safe, both for workers and for consumers. They were able to take the best safety protocols, including, by the way, having consumers coming in, signing that, committing to the idea that they haven't been exposed to COVID, agreeing to take their temperature. I mean, it's a really cool program, and I've shared with my subcommittees the documents that they created. But it's an example of how employers put workers first, came together and found that when they did that, they actually found increased support from consumers and the community. The second is a program that we launched, my organization launched with Governor Newsom. It's called High Road Kitchens. And we were able to raise a combination of public and private dollars to provide cash grants to restaurants that commit to going through our equity, racial equity toolkit and training program to desegregate their restaurants and increase equity in that desegregation that I was talking about that leads to the Bay Area being the most racially segregated, having the highest wage gap of any restaurant industry in the country. That program provides cash grants to restaurants that make these commitments to rehire workers and repurpose themselves as community kitchens, feeding thousands of people in need, and at the same time allowing them to sustain themselves. And I can explain more about that. We're doing that in 7 cities across the state, including hopefully Oakland. This week, New York City's announcing the same program, and Boston and Detroit. And so we're growing it outside of California as well. But we could really expand this as an idea in Oakland that we can provide relief to small businesses in a way that actually commits, in a way that allows employers to commit in exchange for that relief to higher wages, increased equity, and to a better future. So I think, you know, rather than thinking about blanket relief, could we think about relief like this that actually gets everybody prioritized and on the same page and really prioritizes a new future? Another thing that we are in real conversations with the governor and the statewide recovery board, the statewide version of this board, is large unemployed workers cooperatives, because there will be millions of workers in the state and thousands in Oakland that are long-term unemployed. When we think about some businesses not coming back, we also have to think about the thousands of workers who will not have jobs for a long period of time. And so we are in the throes of thinking about, could you create unemployed service worker catering cooperatives? Could you actually create a cooperative of workers, unemployed workers, that perhaps could do delivery, food service, even support small businesses that are struggling with the high fees of an Uber Eats or a other delivery service? Could you have a cooperative that actually provides a more reasonable rate to small businesses and also employs lots of unemployed workers? And to support this, we've created through our emergency fund, particularly for undocumented workers and other workers who are not able to access any other benefits, we've created telehealth programs, we've created EITC support and support around negotiation with landlords, although what we really need in each of these cases is universal health care, livable wages, and rent cancellation, not just postponement. So I could say a lot more, but I do just want to close by saying, I hope the fact that there are not as many worker voices as there are employer voices in this group doesn't limit us from thinking collaboratively about how we need to think constantly about how workers are really, really struggling and suffering right now, and really deeply angry and frustrated, and how we bring those voices together with employers and solutions that could benefit everybody, and most importantly, drive an equity agenda that will get us to a better place than we were prior to the pandemic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Saru. And then Liz, were there words you wanted to add, or do you have a presentation that you want us to permit?
Yeah, I'm not even going to try to do the technology on the presentation.
Okay.
And I'll share an outline to the group after we're done. Thank you, Saru, for everything you just mentioned. And again, I think I just want to echo again, part of the reason I'm on here today is to make sure that we have a strong worker voice in the planning and the oversight of this recovery, because without that, we won't be able to recover. Essential workers also need to have a voice. And the way I want to kind of frame my perspective from labor and the different unions that I represent and the workers, broke it down into 2 categories. And again, I'll share this with you after the call so I can go out. And a lot of the research was done by the UC Berkeley Labor Center as well. It broke down into 2 categories. The first one is unemployed workers. You know, the loss of income, the loss of health care, the loss of housing, economic instability, and increased stress and anxiety. That's the one side I'm seeing. The other side is the essential workers. So those workers who have been out there, therefore have a greater exposure to the coronavirus, have higher rates of illness and death, and have a higher rate of exposing their family members, which also have a higher rate of increased stress and anxiety. In Oakland in particular, we saw the unemployment increase from 4% in March to 14.2% in April. That's a huge, huge unprecedented leap. So one of the things I wanted to focus on was just, okay, so now what? A lot of the impact of this we haven't seen, to be honest. There's still a lot of unknowns out there. But as we start talking about the recovery, one of the things I wanted to focus on was getting money into people's pockets, because that's what I'm hearing the most, is making sure that folks are getting paid, whether it's the unemployment insurance or getting back to work, because people really want to get back to work. But also with that is expanding access to the childcare. A lot of the essential workers, when the schools shut down and the daycare shut down, they didn't have childcare. The other thing is having strong worker voice in the planning and oversight to make sure that those that are on the front lines have health and safety committees to make sure that they have a voice in making sure that they're protected. And also making sure that folks have a place to go back to when things go back to quote unquote normal. The workers who have been laid off or furloughed actually have a place to go back to, and make sure that they have the job they were doing before. And then ensuring health and safety. Again, we need to expand access to paid sick leave. So no worker is put in the position of having to go to work while they're sick. And then exploring ways to increase state and local revenue so that we can continue to move in towards the economic recovery and take the necessary measures to avoid unnecessary cuts and layoffs. So I'll stop there. Again, I wanted to just make it brief and put this out there. And I have a short document that I will send with the group.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much, Saru, for elevating these concerns. And we're going to endeavor to keep them at the center of everything that we're doing here. So in the balance of our time together, we're going to focus primarily on the report outs from the working groups, all of which have convened since we last met. And at this point, we're more in what needs to be on the table stage. And we'll quickly move into the how do we rationalize this, how do we connect this to public policy stage. So we're going to be connecting with the leaders of the work groups to really help them kind of bucket the proposals that we're hearing. And before we move into that, I'm going to turn it over, and actually just for this next segment, turn it over to Marissa to talk a little bit about the city's response, some of the data that we're seeing, and then manage the conversation related to the work groups. Marissa.
Yeah, thank you, Micah. Thank you so much, Saru and Liz, and our other worker reps in the group. This is one way that our race and equity teams within City of Oakland have a methodology for addressing structural racism, and it usually begins with identifying disparity data and then sharing those with the community to help co-create recommendations and actions to reduce disparities. So in conversation with our workforce development director, Lysandra Dial and Brandon Walensky, who's also my colleague on the race and equity team, we wanted to put together these maps for you that look at the total unemployment and pandemic unemployment claims across Oakland. You can see that the darkest areas that's the left-hand map, the darkest areas in zip code 94606 and 601 are the highest number of claims. The total unemployment is in the tens of thousands. 94601 and another area that's darker, 94605, were areas of very high unemployment prior to the pandemic as well. And our workforce development division has done a lot of work in the last year to focus resources on those areas as part of addressing disparities. On the right-hand side is a coronavirus infection rate map. Again, you see the most significant areas impacted in East Oakland. And so we do have a separate city health equity task force, but we know there's going to be a lot of intersections with the health of, especially around the health of workers and the ability to work. And so we wanted to present these to you together. And now I'd like to go quickly to our work groups, because I've been really looking forward to hearing back from some of those amazing conversations that took part. Oh, sorry, very quick run through of city updates. You can read them yourselves, but things that we were gonna update you on today, I think I'm just gonna dash through this, except to also add paid sick leave was something else that was adopted. Feel free to reach out if you want more details about that. And now we'll go to the work groups. Thank you, Alexa. And just let you know that we are taking short-term recommendations immediately from these meetings to our city departments and external parties, as well as in the long term and with your assistance in your work groups, help synthesize and summarize recommendations that we can then bring to our city administration, council, and mayor. So both of those pathways to bringing change are open. And actually, I see the mayor just popped in. Do we want to go to
Thank
her?
you, Marissa. Yeah, our mayor just joined us, so I wanted to give her the floor so that she can share some words. Mayor?
Hi, I apologize for not being on earlier. I am straight from our press conference where we did announce a curfew in Oakland from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. every day until further notice. This is in concert with Alameda County. Many other cities in our area will be having the same hours and timing. It was not taken lightly to go there, but I'm sure that I'm talking to a group of people that agree that that any other tool that we can use that will assist us in getting through this incredibly painful moment is a tool that we can use. I'm really here to answer questions and just to be in I hate to say a community of pain right now, but that is the unfortunate moment we find ourselves in. I do still have tremendous optimism about Oakland, our resilience, our grittiness, our creativity, our feistiness. So I know that all of you that are on this call are some of my favorite human beings on the planet. And so I do have a lot of faith that we will get through this and to something much better on the other side. It feels very painful right now, but I am not without hope. With that, I don't know if Alexa or anyone else, if there are questions that have come up, or if you want to just call on a few people to see if they have any questions for me. I just wanted to make myself available and hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is Alexa. So if anyone has a question, do you want to just raise your hand and we can unmute you?
Mr. Benny Adam has a question.
Thank you for joining the call. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your address. My question about the curfew is, you know, I can only really speak primarily for the downtown, and I do live in East Oakland, but I know a lot of business owners, at least in downtown, and business owners that I'm familiar with, are actually protecting their businesses. They've been in front of their businesses and making sure that things haven't happened. With the curfew, I'm assuming that it's to everyone, and that, you know, and I understand the reasons why. On Friday and Saturday specifically, we didn't have police in front of our buildings until 12:40. And so until that time, we were the only deterrent from broken glass and everything else. So for those business owners who have been there trying to protect their businesses, what are they to do in this moment?
So let me, and whoever's taking notes on this, make sure that I follow up to confirm this. But it would be my expectation, and again, this is new territory for us. You know, I'm born and raised in Oakland. I don't remember Oakland ever being under a curfew, ever. So this is our moment to work through this in a way that makes sense for everyone in the community. But I would presume that you may have security or yourself inside your businesses, and have lights on and be present inside, because curfew has to do with being outside, right? So let me just double check and make sure that is absolutely okay. I also, I think some businesses I know have wanted to potentially hire security. I would think that should be absolutely allowed, if not encouraged. So the only question is, I would hesitate to suggest that you be physically outdoors, outside of your front doors, as opposed to sitting right up against your front door, but on the inside.
Right, and then I guess my only follow up to that is that was my understanding as well. But even then, in regards to transit being home, that was a big concern of what happens. If I get pulled over, do I need to have proof that I have a business, or being out? What does that look like?
Okay, let me double check for you on that. Again, this decision, literally, I've just walked from announcing it. So let me get you that answer. Again, we're clear that, people, essential workers need to be driving and traveling. So, that should be fine. But let me find out what kind of protocol people should have to be able to, because honestly, you are helping us. You are helping us by being in your business. So we really appreciate it. You are eyes and ears, and you're the trusted guardians of the community. So it's really powerful.
I have Kate from Working East Bay. I'm going to unmute you, Kate.
Hi, thank you. This is Kate O'Hara from eBase. Hi, Mayor Schaaf. Thank you so much
Kate.
for joining us. Hi. Just before you got on, we were talking about how workers in Oakland and across the country, Saru from ROC was speaking, and Liz from the Labor Council, about both the racial injustices that exist for many low-wage workers who are people of color, and as well as economic injustices, and how all of that's informing folks' rage and response in this moment. And while certainly not my heart goes out to business owners who are also experiencing economic hardship as well as destruction in this moment. But I did want to follow up on this question about how will OPD be treating people, and what will be the consequences in terms of if people are out beyond the curfew, just given that it's 4 o'clock right now. And so it's not that far away until the curfew goes into effect. I can't imagine the word is going to get out to all the workers who may be, traveling in between home and work, or just to people who may be out in the community. We've all been operating under a shelter in place now for weeks, and yet, there haven't been any kind of, as far as I know, fines or arrests are related to, if you were out during the shelter in place. So how is the curfew going to be handled differently, and what will be the effects or the penalties if you are out?
So my understanding, and you are correct, I have definitely taken the position that now is not the time to issue fines for people breaking the health order, that we really want people to comply because they care about the community's health and their own health. My understanding, though, is this is similar to what would happen when a protest is declared an unlawful assembly. So typically there are different criteria that must be met before an assembly is declared unlawful. And my understanding is that OPD will use the same protocols that they would use once that determination has been made, which means that they would issue warnings, they would allow a safe egress. And again, my understanding is that the curfew is primarily designed to prevent large gatherings outside. Again, I will double check, but it is not my understanding that it has to do with stopping people who are in their cars. I don't believe there will be, any checkpoint for drivers, right? That people who are in transit, I do not think that that is an issue. It's more the large scale gatherings that have been determined to be an undue strain on our law enforcement resources that really need to be out responding to calls. And so again, I will double check, but that is my understanding, that primarily this tool will be used to disperse gatherings of people that are outdoors, not in cars or not in transit, and that they will use the same warnings and protocols and opportunity to peacefully exit and disperse that they would for unlawful assemblies.
And Dr. Jen Tran had a question. Jen?
Yes. Hi, Mayor. Thank you for explaining to us like what we should be expecting in the next week. My question is, what's being done around like Twitter and Snapchat, like how folks are organizing just in this very new way? And because we're watching people meeting up, you know, yesterday someone came to our store at Fillmore and had 3 cars and thought that we were a jewelry store, you know, and then they quickly just sent a message and dispersed. And the other question is like, what's the dialogue that's being had with other cities? Because when we first started this conversation a few days ago, we said that a lot of the folks are coming from outside of Oakland. So if it's a countywide curfew, then what does that mean? Like, are we controlling people? You know, are we checking for license? Like how has that conversation evolved in terms of who's participating in these activities?
So, you know, we do have intelligence, which means that we do try and follow social media organizing. So that is part of where we get our intelligence. I know that based on some of the initial data from arrests, we are seeing groups coming from areas like Stockton. So, you know, not far out of the area, but out of the area. So I do not envision that we have the resources to be checking people's IDs as they enter the city. And that's not a place that I'd like to get.
No.
But yes, I think you are correct. And we are trying to intersect things before they get to Oakland. I will say, like, this is not just an Oakland problem. I mean, Friday night, it really kicked off that way. But last night, we actually probably saw less damage than a lot of other cities. I mean, Union City and San Leandro and Walnut Creek got hit really badly. And so the other impact, I've got to, you're my last call. Okay. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought now. The way that mutual aid works is we really look at the whole region and we're able to move all the resources around accordingly. So there's a great deal of coordination and collaboration, specifically within Alameda County. Okay. All right. Well, I apologize. I have to hop off, but I will follow up. Please, you know, maybe put additional questions that you have in the chat. We'll get you answers and email them out to you. Thank you for being part of our beloved community. There is a tremendous amount of healing and recovery that we have to do, and I look forward to doing it in partnership with you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go to our first working group. We only have just over 15 minutes left, so but I would love to hear from each working group, and especially to see where we have overlapping threads and common threads. So I wanted to start with the cross-industry group led by Julina Bonilla. And if you're able to do less than 5 minutes, that's great. But we're excited to hear from you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I will take definitely less than 5 minutes and rely on some of my other partners. And so we had a very, I think, genuine and very deep conversations. And some of the things that we heard that resonated were very focused on, you know, with the focus on low income people and what those kind of high impact strategies are and what type of public-private sector partnerships really could be talked about. I think we heard from one of our employers, Rainin, and they offered what I thought was really an interesting model where they have taken pay cuts and really across the board looked at pay cuts relative to salaries and instituted no pay cuts for hourly workers. And we thought that that really was a model that resonated and one that should be highlighted. I think some of the other things that we talked about really focused on if we're thinking about how to re-envision and reimagine what economic recovery looks like, with a focus on our most vulnerable populations, considering childcare and our elder care, thinking about what banking and what banking resources look like for our communities who are impacted, as we've seen by the disparity map that was shared. I think that's really important. We talked about making sure that as economies become depressed and as our community becomes much more vulnerable, that venture capitalists who are lurking on the outsides aren't coming in and looking to feast upon Oakland in ways that are detrimental to us as a community, and really holding focus on that. And really thinking about what type of policies could be instituted as a way to from all of our public-private, all of our public agencies, thinking about what type of policies do we want to consider that would be impactful for creating the type of nurturing environment that we want for our residents. And I think along the lines of economic development, along the lines of health impacts in our community, we had lots of different discussions about what could look different and how it could look different, but it definitely had to be in partnership with our public and private sectors. And that dialogue had to be real and happening on the ground. And I think what I was also hearing earlier is that worker voice needs to be central in those conversations. And so I really appreciate some of the framing that was done early on by Saru and by Liz. And I'll stop there, and perhaps others may want to, who participated, may want to chime in.
Thank you, Jelena. Does anyone else from the cross-sector working group want to add anything? Okay, thank you so much. Let's go to phase one. Barb Leslie, you're the leader of that group.
Thanks, Marissa. I'll try to be brief and not redundant. First, I want to tell you who was on the call. We had representatives from Kaiser Native American Health Center, Sutter, Dreisbach, Allied, and obviously our partners in the building trades. Many of you, in fact, I think everybody except from Yvette is on the call today, but I know Jennifer is standing in for her. This group of people, and then the folks that couldn't be on clearly waited and we'll do later. The group represented a variety of essential workers as well as part of the workforce that will be coming in as sort of the phase 2 and beyond employees, and representing about 15 to 20,000 employees actually across our community. When you look at the actual phase 1 definition, it's a lot of sort of what's already happened relative to PPE, securing PPE activity, equipment, contract tracing and testing capabilities. That sort of permeated our conversation as we sort of talked about phase 1 into phase 2. But I think the general concern was that we have access to this and we provide sort of a comprehensive list of resources for folks that might not have as many opportunities as some of our larger businesses, or clearly our healthcare community that is on the front lines and needs those as well, and certainly initially. We talked a little bit about what it's going to be like to move from phase 1 to phase 2 into sort of retail office, central services, and personal services, and some of the sort of overriding and larger themes were a shared opinion that there is these siloed work efforts right now that need to be, and it is somewhat emblematic of the phasing itself, in that the phasing is by either geography at some level, but really more at industry level. So where we can break down those silos and have some cross-pollination is really important. A need for sort of a unified basic messaging that could be applied to all industries and used locally. We thought was really important, and that could include obviously where to obtain PPE activities, but also just basic guidelines that permeate all industries. I know Kaiser has produced a playbook that I think is a template, and I know what we're doing at the chamber level is obviously getting a lot of feedback from different industries, but what I think we're lacking is this cohesion and this cohesive work effort that we can all access locally. There's a lot of conversations around testing and contract tracing, and I think that led to a conversation about the importance of staying really connected to the county, not just our health officer who's sort of dictating our next steps, but also other members of the county health department that could just help sort of bridge some of those conversational gaps. And then how we move sort of a desire to move sort of beyond diagnostic to surveillance level testing, that we haven't done enough contract tracing, that really might be the impediment, contract tracing discussions that really might be the impediment to opening up sort of more formally some of our industries. We talked about the increased test sites across the community, many of which were represented by the folks on our call, which was really great, but that we needed to probably talk about that more. And again, the deeper connection to the county and the work that the county is doing in partnership with the city. We wanted to use the opportunities of what we've seen open up, like construction, as informing our decision-making going forward into the phase 1 to phase 2 and beyond opening. And then how would we be doing enforcement, some creative ways around how we pivot at the street level, at the business level, in terms of looking for enforcement or creative ways where community members could step up and speak up, like ambassadors almost, to make sure that people are sort of doing what they can, either block by block or business by business, and then maybe establishing some training criteria that was consistent amongst all those organizations, and some set of standards, again, that we're able to use across businesses, not just industry specific, that we've seen sort of come through now over the from the state and from other parties. So that's kind of where we were in terms of our discussion. Clearly we need to have more of them, and that was just the beginning part of it. I want to see if, I know Emily's on the call, she was spoke up. Greg, you're on the call. Anybody else want to speak up and add anything to those notes? And apologies if they're a little bit disjointed. Like everybody else, it's been a pretty interesting day for the chamber, and we specifically were pretty impacted, so we're trying to sort of dig out of that, both literally and figuratively. So anybody else wants to weigh in, that would be great.
Thanks, Barb. And I think in the interest of time, because we have 3 more groups to hear from, Marissa, we might want to move on to the next group. But thank you. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marissa?
Yeah, could we have Ari or Ali from phase 2, please? And thank you, Barb. That was great.
Are you all able to see this? Okay, wonderful. So I'll try to fly through this as quickly as possible. So to start our group, we basically just asked what are the top 3 issues that we need to address, and then also kind of brainstormed and pulled together examples that we saw from other cities, where we can borrow sort of the best ideas and not recreate the wheel. So our group is actually a pretty well mixed group of larger, smaller employers. We know we have the Bid Alliance. Happy to also have Sauter there to speak to the labor piece. And so we came up with our list of top 4 priorities. So safe and successful reopening, innovative uses of our public space, covering rent and eviction, and then fees and taxes. We decided that rent and eviction and fees and taxes, they could actually probably have a little bit more time, just because they're not quite as urgent as the safety and public space piece. So with that, we are prioritizing talking about safe and successful reopening. And to that, we want to make sure that we're creating standard operating procedures and protocols, both for our employees and then also to make sure our customers are cared for. Potentially talking about issuing, guest health statements to let people know, in the same way that if you consume uncooked food, you might catch an illness. If you are in public, you might catch COVID. So that was just an idea. And then also talking about PPE and the needs for our small business owners and seeing if there's potential for us to kind of pull together in our ordering or buying in some way to make it more affordable for our small business owners, or even figuring out how we can give that to them for free. And then the other part of safe and successful reopening is a buy local campaign, helping with consumer confidence, making sure people feel comfortable knowing that we have a standard operating procedure and protocol, that we are taking the right safety measures. And so we just want to let them know that they need to support our small businesses who are hurting pretty badly right now. And then to the public space piece, of course, we do think it's a really great opportunity for us to be able to have sidewalk cafes. We talked through a little bit of, what small businesses will need to be able to use these programs fully. And there's there is a design component, of course. And then also highlighting the fact that if our small businesses have basically had no income for the last couple of months and will come back to a reduced income, that means that we will need to figure out how to fund these street improvements, because it's not likely that our small businesses can handle that burden. The other thing that we've talked about within using public space is how we can use vacant space. So whether it's city-owned vacant land, or figuring out ways to use privately owned, storefronts or other things like that in a clever way to help with the recovery. We had a few other ideas, but I will stop there and pass it on to the next group.
Thank you so much, Ari.
We can't hear you, Marissa.
Oh, no way.
Okay, there you are. You're back.
Okay. Next is Jose Corona with the Phase 3 Working Group. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And I want to thank Regina, Jay, Archie, John Brower, Cynthia, Dr. Tran, Yusuf, and Kay Norman for participating in our group. Obviously, I don't have a nice PowerPoint like Ari, but I'll do my best. Just to keep it really brief, I think that we went straight at the issue right away, that since this is Phase 3, which includes gyms, hair salons, nail spas, and others, we're not in Phase 3 anymore, and the biggest issue remains rent. And so the issue around what could the city or what could this group do around protection or incentives around rent, and not rent deferment, but really rent protection or waiving the rent. So I think that's something that came up right off the bat, and that's something that's probably the key issue, because that's the biggest fixed cost that the businesses have right now. However, we also had conversations, and I think John Brower reminded us that yes, one thing is about business, but the other thing we shouldn't forget about the individuals and income building, because individuals are going to make choices with their money. The money they have right now obviously is tight. So we should also be integrating or including ways of how we can actually increase income for our individual residents across the city. So Saru's presentation and Liz's presentation was very relevant today, because we can't forget about our workers. We can't forget about our people. There was also a really good conversation regarding the flexibility and use of space. And others, feel free to chime in on this, but there was an idea around how can the city help elapse requirements to allow cross-service in their spaces. So for example, Yusuf cited the example around, what if my barbershop could be used for a different way in repurposing my space. Obviously being very thoughtful about how we repurpose space that can't be used right now, but something that came up was around that cross-sector idea of space use. In the same manner, how can we actually get and cross-train people that could potentially be unemployed right now and be repurposed for other ideas, for other workers. Jenny cited the example around beautification projects. So how can we activate the workforce around doing beautification projects in neighborhoods and potentially tap into pots of money from the city, like Workforce Investment Board money, to fund some of these efforts. There's many other topics that came up, but I think I will stop there just for time's sake.
Okay, thank you. And for our last work group, I'm going to turn to phase 4, my working group, led by Dr. Miyako Hatano from the Oakland Symphony.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. And basically everything that the groups before us have said have definitely been relevant. Our group is representing the cultural sector. I'm with Oakland Symphony. We have the State Department of Economic Development, Oakland Art Murmur, Southwest Airlines, Alameda County Labor Council, the Oakland A's, Visit Oakland, Oak Stop, and Oakland Private Industry Council. These are big swaths of people. All of these organizations occupy a lot of space, and so leases have been a really big piece of this, as well as landlords for those who own the physical space. Our work group represents sectors. We have members, a member who is in the Conventions and Meetings Task Force, Alameda County Cultural Advocates, and of course the Labor Council again. Tourism is Oakland's second largest private employer, and as such, since the beginning of COVID, there's been a 95% revenue drop from $20 million to $200,000 during the shelter in place. For landlords and leases, the abatement is helpful, and of course, depending on a landlord's debt situation, they are more able to facilitate those types of negotiations. But we're finding in our sector that quite a few organizations are actually moving to break leases and contracts with venues and office space in order to help support their people and their missions or others. A lot has gone online and virtual, and given phase 4, we're looking at a much more long-term issue. And so we're definitely, working with some pretty major challenges. Venues, we're really finding that, venues, large presenting companies, they're not forecasting any income through the end of 2020. And so as venues go forward, we're looking at needing uniform standards, additional bathrooms for maintaining distance, new technology for touchless transactions, clear protocols for reopening, and clarity on enforcing guidelines. Enforcement is one of the biggest challenges, I think, and holding all venues accountable to the same level. Of course, it would be helpful to have reduced costs to meet health requirements for sanitizer, gloves, and thermometers. And of course, again, more ways to facilitate all of those pieces. For our small businesses and nonprofits, access for SBA and EDA funding, beyond the PPP, and some nonprofits who have contract workers were not eligible for PPP. For EDA, again, small businesses who are just needing loans to get them through this period may not be eligible because there isn't that clear business plan to get things moving. Unemployment costs are skyrocketing, and reimbursing employers are getting hit very, very hard. And even an organization that might go dark is accruing costs because of going dark and have to reimburse unemployment costs. For workers, the Oakland A's on a given game day would be employing 1,000 workers a day. The Alameda County cultural sector has lost 67% of jobs, and after PPP ends, we're projecting that will go up significantly. Some of the immediate strategies that we talked about implementing was to help cull the HHS protocols down by industry to support ease of reopening, provide business with shared direction so we are not creating signage ad hoc, reduce burdens for businesses, provide or reduce cost for, again, all of the safety and mandatory requirements that will be coming out, and a clear plan and communication about this so that it's across our city. continue the free reduced cost transportation to get workers to and from jobs, and a very hyper local, shop local campaign. Artists create assets, and the priority is to really keep our dollars in our community, and of course public and private cross-sector partnerships and partnerships within each sectors. We also talked about, from an arts and cultural standpoint, the importance of creating a performing arts center so that artists can all rely on one another and the assets of one another. Disparities in the sector, this is huge. I mean, hotel workers, you know, we just went through so many of these pieces. Longer term, there was talk about Stockton's Universal Basic Income campaign. This year it's an election year. We need to remove as many barriers as possible to participate in the election. Healthcare access, free clinics and childcare. And we need to shrink the digital divide, provide universal access to Wi-Fi and tools for creating websites, and for supporting established artists who may not have had to work in that medium before. So looking forward, we're really looking at a big shift where tourism is becoming hyper-local. Visit California, as an example, has pivoted to spending 100% of their dollars in-state, attracting in-state tourists. We're looking at outdoor performances, but how do we monetize that to get our artists and other workers back to work? What about ABC liquor permits? How would something like that work? And you know, we've really come down to access to culture, you know, sports, and other activities is really, really a social determinant of health. And this disparity has become even wider during the shelter in place. And so we really need to find ways to bring moments of beauty and joy to all people, no matter what, during this, and employ people while we're doing so. I don't know if there's anybody else in our group. I know I saw quite a few of you on here, but hopefully I hit most of our points.
Thank you so much. That was great. So many good ideas from the groups. And I want to ask, we're a little bit past time again. I know today's been a little bit crazy, and this meeting has reflected the chaos of the day, but it's so great to hear from everyone. Is it okay with everyone if we go about 10 minutes over, if we go till about 4:45, so we can have a little bit of wrap up? Obviously, if you can't stay, feel free to jump off. But I did want to hand it back to our facilitators, to Micah, just to talk about what we're going to be doing with all this great information and how it's going to be categorized and synthesized into recommendations. So Micah, I can put up the slide, and you want to talk about that?
Sure. I just want to assure folks that there is quite a lot going on behind the scenes. You know, these meetings are critical, but you know, we're talking almost every day, it seems like, at this point. And in order to really refine these lists, we're going to be asking the work group leads, working with the supportive city staff and in consultation with the other work group members, to really refine the recommendations that were surfaced and make sure that we understand which are business actions that can be taken in terms of private sector policies, which are city actions, and then where do we need to come together as people who care about the people, the workers, and the businesses of Oakland to advocate at the county level, state level, and federal level. So we'll be moving also, you know, through these and rationalizing them across the different groups as we also continue to share resources and act as a resource for each other. Our next meeting as this entire group will be Monday, June 15th. But each of the work groups will be meeting between now and then, at least one, to continue on with you know, taking all these issues and making them one step more specific. As we all, you know, just keep adapting to this day by day. Thank you to everybody for everything you're doing right now. It's quite a lot, and I can hand it back over to the city staff and the other co-facilitators to wrap it up with some more comments.
Okay. Thank you so much, Micah, and thank you to all of you just for your contributions, for your ideas, for your input. It really does give me, I think, and a lot of us at the city, hope to see our community coming together and just to feel the energy and the ideas coming from all of you. Since we do have James here today, just for the last couple of minutes, I wanted to see James Head, if you had any words you wanted to share out for the group just to take us out in the last couple of minutes before we sign off. James?
Hi, sure. Well, let me first really thank everybody for the work that you're doing. I mean, it's heartwarming, I think, and encouraging to hear where we are and some of the ideas that you have. I too just want to echo the pain that we're all feeling, but want to keep us focused on the fact that this is a moment in time that is an opportunity for us, and we don't get many of those even in our lifetimes. And so I look forward to the continued work that this group is doing, but even more so look forward to some strategies and actions that moves Oakland forward and moves the issues that you all have identified forward. So really greatly appreciate the time, effort, and your commitment to not just to the city, but to the region, the state, and the country, if not the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, James, and thank you to all of our facilitators and our working group members and leads. And we will see everybody back here on June 15th. And take care until then, and stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.